So we are nearing just 2 weeks from release of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and with that we do have official previews that have gone live from various different media outlets. This was an exclusive event where Nintendo handpicked who could attend and who could do write-ups and post gameplay online, but we have a lot of new details, updates, and various interesting opinions floating around online following the preview event. And in this particular video, you won't have to worry about any deep spoilers. It does appear that just about all of the gameplay preview session was relatively early game, and a lot of things that could potentially be story spoilers people were not supposed to talk about as part of this preview. So if you are someone who wants to go into this game with limited knowledge, this video will not ruin that for you. But with that, we have to dive into all of the new Tears of the Kingdom gameplay discoveries right now. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification if you're as excited for Tears of the Kingdom to finally release as I am. And we have to first kick off this conversation with a massive question that I know many of you want to know the answer to as well, myself included, and that is there traditional dungeons in this game? Well, unfortunately, we don't have 100% confirmation, but it does appear that something was spotted in these previews that was very similar to a big dungeon. We already kind of know that these Zonai shrines, the teleport looking points we've seen in the same spot as where some traditional shrines were from Breath of the Wild, in addition to ones being in new spots, it does appear that those have entrances following this gameplay preview, so those will likely be back in the same form and fashion that they were in Breath of the Wild, where that is how you will upgrade your stamina and hearts. At least that's what I'm expecting from those, following all of the snippets we've seen of them so far, and now getting confirmation that they have openings in them which very much look like you can traverse into them, and there's likely some kind of shrine. I hope that they are elemental themed and change up their style from time to time this time around, but we will have to wait and see for that. But one Mr. Gene Park had the following to say of an area that he discovered in the sky, where it reads, "Dungeons in Zelda? I solved a puzzle and opened the entrance to one in the sky. Nintendo said do not enter. I can see inside and it looks mysterious and unlike anything in Breath of the Wild, but true nature of dungeon design is still unknown to us." He then clarifies, "To be clear, I'm not sure if the entrance I opened was to a dungeon or a shrine type location, but I did enter complicated cave networks with varying paths. There seems to be a lot more design built into the map." So again, that's not confirmation, but it's definitely a different setup than a traditional Zonai style shrine that we've seen so far. So whether or not there are more important shrines that are more lengthy, that you have to solve bigger puzzles just to get to, and maybe you get a bigger reward at the end of them, or if this was one of the giant dungeons that you will have to go through, fight a giant boss at the end, it's elemental themed in some way, shape, or form, or in this case, potentially just sky themed, I do think that this is a great confirmation that we will have various different large structures to traverse, which I think you could say was the case from the most recent trailer anyway, but we know something will be back in the place of traditional dungeons. You could even argue that the 4 divine beasts were dungeons in their own way, but I don't think we're getting the divine beasts back once again in this game. I do think it's something different, and hearing about this giant sky dungeon that Nintendo did not allow Mr. Gene Park to go into, I think is very cool to see talked about online. Now from there, we need to discuss some of the gameplay and progression structure of the game being altered from various different previews. And one of the first things I want to tackle is those giant towers that we've talked about quite a bit in previous videos, where they are apparently the replacement for the map towers. They are set up entirely different in Tears of the Kingdom, with many of the previewers saying that they're structured kind of like an enemy stronghold, that you have to eliminate all the enemies or get up to the entrance from knocking out the enemies, or using your crafts that we will be talking about in just a moment to kind of get there in your own way. But these apparently are guarded very well, and you have to get to the entrance, and likely this is the part where we will step into that elevator scene that we have seen, where Link goes downward to an underground section after you do make it to the center of the map tower. You are not trying to climb to the top to activate a portion of your Sheikah map, but rather you're going to go into an elevator shaft and drop down, probably into something like an underground cave area that we saw from that ad spot from Nintendo with the negative coordinates noted on the map. It's probably entirely dark. We'll have to light up the room, and maybe after fending off enemies or getting to the end of whatever underground dungeon awaits us in those areas, we will probably unlock a portion of the map at the end of that. It could be some kind of item upgrade, maybe charge expansions for how Link charges and utilizes all of the vehicles that he crafts with Ultra Hand, but I do believe that something notable is waiting at the end of one of those underground areas that you have to put quite a bit more thought in how you will approach those and get to them and unlock them ultimately than just the traditional map towers. Now, the big thing that was focused on within this preview event was all of Link's different abilities. Ultra Hand just quite honestly sounds like you can do anything you can set your mind to. It's going to be truly limitless, and there also is an upgraded version of it, and this would be considered a very slight spoiler because Nintendo didn't want people to talk about this feature, but we will just quickly say the name Auto Build because it's out there is the upgraded version of Ultra Hand, and it seems to me like what you do with Ultra Hand probably makes some kind of blueprint of some sort. Maybe it's within your menu system somewhere, but it looks like you will be able to quick build things that you have built in the past, so you won't have to painstakingly recreate something over and over from scratch. And I think that's awesome, especially when it comes to the stone sky birds that we've seen flying around. It looks like the traversal in the sky in this game is just going to be next level, and that's going to be one thing that definitely helps you do it quicker. And with that, it looks like Zonai charges will be a very big central point of how Link traverses within this game. We now know that those pachinko style machines actually release recharges for Link's satchel that has the batteries on them. You can exchange items that you find within the world into that machine and ultimately get a lot of the different recharges that you will need to continue to fly throughout the sky or just build and traverse on your different various crafts. It looks like those will be spread all throughout Hyrule and all throughout the Sky Islands, as we've seen that big circular structure. That was a pachinko style machine on the inside. That's what those do, and we now know that. The fast travel medallion's really cool. If you try something too aggressive and you want to fast travel right back to where you dropped that thing, you can do it at any point in time, even if you're falling in the sky, which is really cool. Bomb flowers are back in a big way. We wondered what would happen with the Sheikah runes not being around anymore, and instead of those blue bombs, we now have the traditional throwback Zelda item known as the bomb flower. We can of course attach them to arrows, or we can just use them as standalone items, but they are just an item in our inventory now. Korok puzzles are back in some way, shape, and form. Whether you like them or not, they're here to stay. Apparently, it does seem to be tied to the inventory upgrade system, but we don't know if the puzzles are more tied to something of a more optional side quest, or if it's the same thing where there's 900 plus seeds scattered around and you ultimately just get a giant seed at the end of it, which we all know what it really is. I personally was pulling for something different than the Korok seeds this time around, but it does look like they are officially back, and we can now confirm that. Now, to briefly highlight just some of the more controversial talking points online, there has been some comparisons with how Link traverses in this game to other games like Minecraft and even Fortnite, which may be red flags for you at the very start of the conversation when you're like, I don't want my Zelda game to feel like Minecraft or Fortnite, but I think that these are more mainstream media outlets trying to paint a picture of the fact that Tears of the Kingdom is a very creative style game, meaning that how you want to traverse through this world is how you will be able to do it. A lot of the different previewers mentioned that you can't play this game just like Breath of the Wild and go into it with that mindset. You have to use the mechanics that they gave you, which are largely based around creativity and making various vehicles with Ultra Hand, as well as using Fuse with all of your weapons to upgrade the durability or the attack power of them. You will have to use Recall to solve different puzzles. The point is that there are new mechanics in this game at a core level for a reason, and how we interact with the world will be very different, and some people are just tying that similarity to a game like Minecraft, where you can go in and create your own world and the creative aspect of that game is what draws a lot of players to it. I have full faith in the Zelda team at this point in time, as I've grown up playing every mainline Zelda game at release past Ocarina of Time. I have full faith that they're going to implement these gameplay changes in a very fun and inviting way for fans of older, more traditional Zelda games and fans of the Breath of the Wild era Zelda games. One other negative that's being discussed online that you just can't look the other way on is some potential frame rate issues with this game. It seems to be locked at a consistent 30 for the most part, but there are definitely different parts where people have noted that frame stutter is real and you do drop frames, mainly when you're interacting with Link's different abilities and a lot of enemies are on screen. That is disheartening to hear, although we don't know that this demo build is the final build of the game and some things could definitely be touched up, but I think that that is just the reality of the Nintendo Switch with the Tegra X1 and it being pushed to its limits at what it can actually do with this title, with the scope of it, with the kind of draw distance that we are seeing it render at all times from the sky to the grounds beneath, and the fact that there's no loading screens in between any of that stuff. If you get into an environment where there's a ton of enemies on screen, you may be seeing some frame stutter, especially at release, and I definitely think that this, more than anything, justifies the argument that hopefully we get some kind of new Nintendo Switch hardware at some point in time in the future, and hopefully backwards compatibility is a thing and you can actually play this game potentially at a 60 frames per second, or at least with a locked 30 without it dipping anywhere. But there is some reason to be slightly concerned about frame dip at certain points within the game. But from everything we can see so far, the traditional Korok Forest is not back, so we might be okay in terms of it not chugging to a 15 or 20 frames per second rate like we originally saw with Breath of the Wild back in the day. Now, we will wrap up the conversation of this latest preview and all of the updates that we now know to Tears of the Kingdom with some final impressions from a few of the different media outlets that were out there, where you have The Verge saying, once you start really using Link's new abilities to interact with things around him, the monsters, the weapons, the bushes full of bomb flowers, Tears of the Kingdom reveals itself to be a much more technically complex and imaginative game than its predecessor, which is saying something. GameSpot has the following to say: to my surprise, Tears of the Kingdom bridged that gap by presenting open-ended, physics-based puzzles, but with solutions that felt so intuitive that I still got the satisfaction of finding my own complicated but correct way. Eurogamer says Tears of the Kingdom wants to fill players with a passion for creativity and experimentation in the same way Breath of the Wild urged for exploration. I can easily see myself spending hours constructing the perfect death machine which will crush enemies without me ever having to unsheath a sword. There is so much more that we could go down the rabbit hole discussing about this game, but I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video around all the new previews and newest updates around it online. What are you most excited for walking away from all of this new information? Are you feeling better or worse about the game overall now that we have all of this new footage and new opinions online around it? And what are some of your wish list items that we haven't had confirmed or denied yet that you hope we see featured in Tears of the Kingdom at release? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.